So today's message, we're going to title it Abraham's Struggles with Boundaries. Abraham's name already reveals, like we mentioned, it reveals the greatest, the dominant idea in his life, fatherhood. The problem is, even though God developed his fatherhood, his fathering, it did not start there. It was actually the weakest area in Abraham's life. The original name, Abram, God later changed it to Abraham. Abram means father, exalted father. Now, typically in Scripture, names are given for a reason. A godly reason or a broken reason. Name is synonymous with identity. And you and I, we get our identity either through a godly way or through a redeemed way. You see, because it may start in a broken way. When we see the fighting between Jacob's wives and how they named their children in such a circumstantial way. Yeah, I want to name you Asher because God made me happy that I have more children than my sister. Yeah. There is a problem with that. If I was Asher, I would say, well, Dad, Jacob, Dad, where were you when she named it this? So again, perennial brokenness to go around, with which we have no way of identifying. I'm sure.
Come on, preacher.
But you see, I think, and I want to show a little bit of proof of why I think this way. I think I have good basis to think this. But I think Terah, Abraham's dad, named Abraham out of brokenness. I think it was actually his own desire to be exalted. Maybe in his fathering, but I think he was trying to live through his son. And I'm going to show you a little bit about the dysfunction that begins with Terah, with Abraham's dad. I think we see in Abraham 3 levels of dysfunction, especially in boundaries. Simply, we see that he struggles with the boundaries set for him by those in authority. We're going to see about his dad, but we are more familiar with his struggles with the authority of Pharaoh when he goes down to Egypt, and he feels like he can't tell the truth to this man. He has a tremendous lack of confidence. And it shows in the sphere of man that he has. He does the same again with Melek years later. And I think he struggled with this sense of boundaries coming from authorities. I think it originated in his father. And we're going to see a little bit about that. But the second level of boundaries, dysfunctions, is peer-to-peer. You see, when you have your boundaries kind of trampled over and disrespected, coming from your dad, and then you venture out into the world, and then you have to relate to other people, you kind of struggle. And boundaries, they have a lot to do. They have everything to do with power. Proper boundaries, properly cultivated boundaries communicate to us, I respect you. I respect the fact that you have power, that you have decisions that I trust that you can make. Amen. That does a lot for a son, for a daughter. But the opposite then causes you to struggle with your peers. Because you see, all of a sudden, now you have power. Now you have a say, you have an opinion, you have money, you have possessions, you have a wife, you have all kinds of things, or a husband. You have all kinds of opportunities now for you to exercise this power of managing your own boundaries. And so that's the second level in which a dysfunction can manifest. And naturally, boundary dysfunctions will manifest in those who are under you. Some people think their wives are under them, and they treat them that way. That's wrong. But they have their children first and foremost. They have a congregation, because some of these people with dysfunctional boundaries, they become pastors. They go into the ministry, or they become teachers, and they have influence. They may have influence at work, right? They may be a supervisor, and then they have people under them, and they're treating them with I believe there are two forms. The two ways in which these dysfunction manifest themselves. In these three levels, right, with authorities, with peers, with those under you, I think boundaries may manifest in an aggressive way. Those who are around you, they either respect you, they may actually fear you, but they can't get close to you. Because and when I say you, I mean me. Because I may have the way in which the wound that was inflicted upon me in the area of boundaries, the way that it may manifest could be in an aggressive way. My boundaries were abused, and I'm going to make everyone around me pay for it. And I'm going to abuse their boundaries, but in an aggressive way. Another way that it can be manifested is actually in a passive way. How so? Well, some of us may have a tendency to rescue people because we know better than them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to abuse their boundaries because they don't know what's good for them. They need to be helped and rescued. And so I'm going to jump in, and through my kindness, I'm going to manipulate my way into managing their boundaries. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that, the aggressive one leaves a trail of people hurt. The other one leaves a trail in his own life of people who disappointed them. Because you see, at some point, those who I'm trying to manage their boundaries, they're going to get up and say, no.
Yes.
And my reaction is going to be, well, how ungrateful are you?
Yeah.
I try to do all of this for you.
Right.
And this is how you pay me. Shame on you. So how do we get out of this? Well, let's see if we see any redemption in Abraham's story. All right, we're going to start out with the fear dynamics in abusive boundaries. Abusive boundaries have a dynamic based on fear. We see this in Terah, Abraham's father. Genesis 11:27. It says, "Now these are the records of the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran became the father of Lot." We know Lot.
Yeah.
He's a friend of ours. Verse 28. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his birth in Ur of the Chaldeans. Well, we know that this is where Abraham was born, this is where they lived, this is where they grew up as a family, but they're not going to stay there. Verse 29, it says, Abraham and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Ishka. Interesting names. Sarai was barren. And she had no child. So Terah took Abraham his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife, and they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to enter the land of Canaan. And they went as far as Haran and settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Before we get into Terah, let me show you one more detail. As we keep reading in Genesis, we jump into chapter 12. So we read in chapter 12:1, it says, Now the Lord said to Abram, Go forth from your country, go forth from your relatives, go forth from your father's house. Go forth to the land which I will show you. The go forth is the verb that controls all of these phrases. It's the one verb for all of these phrases. Interesting. This phrase, go forth, is halach. That's the word to walk. So God is communicating with Abraham, and he's telling him, I want to change your walk. You've been walking according to your dad's influence. I need you to walk in a different way. Your dad's walk had all to do with the family, with the relatives. I need you to walk in a different way. I need you to walk away from your relatives. Create a distance. Set up healthy boundaries. Your father walked in dysfunctional boundaries. I need you to walk differently. All right, so let's talk about the dad, right? Because so far I'm giving him such a bad reputation, right? Let's see if I have any basis to speak of him in this way. Well, we read again in verse 31. It says, "So Terah took Abraham's son, and Lot his son, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, and they left Ur and they went to Haran." Wait. His son is Haran, and he left the place where he died, and they go to a place called Haran. Is that a coincidence? Or is it actually that they arrived at one place and Terah called that place Haran? I think he's trying again to perpetuate Haran's legacy. He's taking care of his son. He's taking care of his daughter, Haran's daughter. So he gets his son Nahor to marry Haran's daughter. He takes care of Lot, who is Haran's son. And in rabbinic literature, we read that Sarai, actually, you know how it says that Sarai was Abraham's sister, his father's daughter. And we don't want to read that, right? Most likely, she was actually adopted. Most likely, she was actually Haran's daughter too, whom Terah adopted, so it became his legal daughter, and then married Abraham. So she was actually his niece. Doesn't sound as bad. Just a touch. Yeah. Just a touch, right? Just a touch. least not his biological sister, full-blown sister. So Haran takes everybody, Terah takes everybody, they go to this place. And it says that they went on their way to Canaan. But they got to this place, Haran, and they stopped there. They never kept going to Canaan. This is a symbol of Israel getting out of Egypt and dying in the wilderness, never entering the land. There's something wrong with the fact that Terah died without entering the land. And why would God say to Abraham, command Abraham, go forth from your father's house, if the father was already dead? He's speaking of the influence of the father. You haven't left your father's house, Abraham, even though he's already dead. And it has to do with the way that he manipulated his relatives' boundaries. Abraham, I don't want you to continue to do this. If you were in our Torah study this morning, we talked about the fact that you have a personal story and you have a background, which is the story of nations. So we have here Abraham's story of him coming into the land and being commanded by the Lord to come into the land. But behind it we have the story of nations, of God furthering his plan to create one nation through Abraham. And it relates also to Lot. So God knows this has to do with, these are further implications that you can see right now, Abraham. So I'm trying to save you from attaching yourself to these other nations. But Abraham trusted God in the big things, but not so much in the little things. Why do I say this? Watch this. 12:5. It says, so Abram went forth as the Lord has spoken to him. Great, right? Exactly what the Lord said to him. But trusted him in the big thing, but in the little things, look what it says. And Lot went with him. And God said, I don't want your relatives. But he didn't obey God in the small things. He did not went forth from his relatives. And it says that Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his nephew. He took them. In the first one it says that Lot walked with him, with Abraham. But in verse 5 it says that he took Lot. See, I think Abraham is demonstrating his way of interfering with Lot's boundaries. I think Abraham convinced Lot, we don't know how old Lot was. But if he would have listened to what God said, he would have left Lot with Nahor. Nahor is his uncle too. His big sister is married to Nahor, so he'll be in family. Abraham could have said, I'm leaving you in his hands. I have a command from God. I need to go without my relatives. And I trust God will have a plan for you, and he will see after you. He will look after you. But instead, Abraham brought Lot with him because he knew what was better for Lot, probably. Nahor was not a picnic. You realize Nahor was the grandfather of Laban.
Yeah.
So you see the same thread going from Terah to Nahor, to Laban. Laban, the one who was going to trick Jacob,
Yeah.
who was going to step all over his boundaries. I think this started with Terah, the granddad. But Abraham comes in and he tries to save Lot. And the result is that we see that weak boundaries are going to try to control other people, whether it's aggressive or passive. In Abraham's case, it was passive controlling. But weak boundaries is going to manifest in us trying to control other people's boundaries. Obviously, this exploded in Abraham's face when Lot said, I am not going to walk with you anymore. I am going to a place that you hate. Have any of your children ever done that to you?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to walk in a way that you hate.
Yeah.
Just because.
Just because.
Because I'm upset with you. You stepped all over my boundaries. And now I'm going to manifest it in some sort of way. And God can take care of Lot.
Oh, yes, he can.
In Peter speaks of Lot. And he says that he was a righteous man.
That's right.
That every day he suffered because of what he saw in Sodom and Gomorrah. See, God was perfectly able to disciple Lot. And Abraham didn't have to carry that upon him. That's not what God had for him. What about Sarah? I want to camp a little bit on Sarah here, because we see some dynamics in Sarah that we can learn a few things here. You see, Sarah had what I call reactionary boundaries. Now, she didn't start very well. Remember, she comes from the same family. And she goes into Egypt with Abraham, and he says to her, tell him you're my sister. She says nothing. She goes in, she's taken into the harem of the Pharaoh. She's in great danger. And he does it a second time. And she says nothing. So she didn't start out very well in terms of her own boundaries, but she's going to grow. And by the time Hagar comes around, even though she stepped all over Hagar's boundaries in many, many ways. Yes, she is Sarah's servant. Remember, Abraham's servant, he treated him very differently.
Yeah.
Sarah's still growing and still struggling. So she steps all over Hagar's boundaries, even disrespecting her own sexuality. She majorly interferes with this woman's life. But she grows, and it comes to the point where she says, I need to put some boundaries with this lady. I need her gone. And though it shows some signs of health, it's reactionary. It's not spirit-led. Because it's done out of anger, out of frustration. And the whole time, Abraham is passive. Passive when he tells her to go and trample over this lady's boundaries and then tell her to leave. You know, he's learning he goes to God by then. I want to talk to us. I want to talk to us out of Ephesians 5:25 as we conclude here. Because Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives, just as Messiah also loved the assembly and gave himself up for her so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. I believe we learned two principles in Sarah's experience with boundaries. Number one is that husbands are meant to lead their wives' spiritual development. Number two is that wives, or let me put it this way, husbands are meant to manage their own spiritual development. Do you see the difference there? You see, when we see there's functional boundaries, we see the opposite. We see someone trying to manage someone else's boundaries instead of trying to lead them into healthy boundaries. There's a great difference between managing and leading. When you manage, you decide what the vision is. You decide what the values are. You decide the objectives, and you decide the strategy. The other person has no say. They just need to follow you. That's managing. There's a place for managing. You manage your own. You set the vision for you and the objectives and your strategy. And you need to do it as you hear God. Obviously. But we're supposed to lead. Lead other people's spiritual growth. You know what that looks like? Leading, ask, what is your vision? And how can I help you accomplish your vision? You see, leading is serving. Managing is lording. If you manage other people's boundaries. This is a lesson that Abraham learned. And I believe towards the end of his life, he had another wife. He had many other sons and daughters. And we hear nothing. We hear no problems with that. I think he learned from Sarah. I think he grew in his experience. He learned Ephesians 5. You see, it says that you sanctify and you wash with the water of the word, you wash your wife. Or the person that you lead. You see, to sanctify someone is to lead them to experience the Holy Spirit in their lives.
Yeah.
It's the only way to be holy, to be sanctified. How can you help someone experience the filling, the gifting, and the fruit of the Spirit? You do that, you will respect people's boundaries because you have to do it with love. It won't come any other way. Love respects everyone's boundaries. You will be loved. You will be able to tell those who have abused your boundaries, not in a reactionary way like Sarah, but you will be able to tell, I have a new respect for who God created me to be. And I'm trying to manage that. And although I appreciate your concern for me, I'm going to take what you've said and submit it to the Lord. And it may not look the way that you envision. And I'm going to follow what he shows me. I love you. I'll always love you. But out of respect for myself and for respect for what God has for me, I have to put him first. And I will respect you the same way. May not go very well the first go around, the first conversation. It'll be a little messy. But you set parameters. So you're setting your boundaries. You are walking away. You're going forth from your relatives and from your father's house. And so you go from dysfunction to healing. Without the healing, you can't be free. You have to address the wound so that you can be free from the effects of the wound.